Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome back to my channel. So this week's video is something that is super relevant to right now, especially if you are here in the United States. We're going to talk about brumation. Now, lots of reptiles brumate, but we're going to be focusing specifically on bearded dragons because it is that time when the bearded dragons are trying to brumate, especially Zsasz. She is doing her Zsasz thing and kind of going in and out, and we're going to talk all about it. Now, keep in mind, not all bearded dragons are going to experience this. Zsasz is 3.5 years old and she might go into full brumation this year, but she never has in the past. So just because it exists doesn't mean that your bearded dragon necessarily will even go through it. So it might not even be something that you need to worry about. But if you are experiencing things that seems like your bearded dragon might be going into brumation, then this is the video for you. Really quick, before we get started, this video is sponsored by thedoobiedo.com. So make sure you stay until the end of this video to find out how you can save 10% off of your order at thedoobiedo.com. First of all, for those who don't know, the dictionary definition of brumation is a state or condition of sluggishness, inactivity, or torpor exhibited by reptiles such as snakes or lizards during winter or extended periods of low temperature. So basically, brumation is when a reptile, specifically again we're talking about bearded dragons, slow down during the colder months, and basically it's like hibernation, except for they're not going to go into full-blown bear hibernation. It's just kind of a more relaxed version of that, if that makes sense. And it varies greatly. Now, in the wild during this, they're going to stay in places like burrows that they find, caves, rocks, any place like that, even amongst leaf litter. They're going to stay in any place like that to protect themselves from the elements while they sleep. And the reason that they do this is because colder means that plants are dying, and as we know, bearded dragons eat 80% plants as adults, and those insects are dying and leaving, and they're gone. There's not as much food for them to access, and in addition to that food loss, they're not really going to have as much access to water either, because if it gets really cold, then the dew that they would normally drink from the leaves is going to freeze, so they're not going to have access to that either. And as we know, bearded dragons are ectothermic, which means they require heat to digest their foods. This means that they can't even digest their food properly. This, coupled with the fact that the days are shorter and the sun isn't as bright, so that means less UV lighting, which is also a requirement for them to digest their foods. So they have evolved this way of surviving through these harsh conditions. And while these guys are built to survive this, it is still a very stressful event for them, especially in the wild, where a lot of them won't make it because where they think that they are safe sleeping, it might still get too cold for them and they could potentially die. So while they are built for it, it's still super stressful. So just keep that in mind going forward. So why do they still brumate in captivity if they aren't exposed to those things that they would be in the wild? First of all, this behavior is hardwired in their DNA. Now, a lot of times reptiles that are kept under strict conditions will actually not undergo brumation at all, but this really only applies to like snakes that are kept in snake racks where they do not have access to any kind of natural light and their temperatures are 100% controlled. A lot of times in that situation, they don't brumate. They are instead put into brumation by breeders. For the most part, bearded dragons are going to experience this if your specific one wants to, I guess. So if your animal is in a tank like mine, Zsasz is in my living room, and my living room has a lot of windows, so she is able to sense that shorter day cycle, the lowering of the UV radiation, and as it gets colder, the temperature in the house does go down some, and she's able to sense that too. So even though the food and water hasn't slowed down, her body is still telling her metabolism to slow down to prepare for that because of those other changes. How long is your animal going to brumate? That completely depends on the animal. They can brumate anywhere from a couple of weeks to a few months. Zsasz, like I said before, has never actually fully gone into brumation. So she will sleep for a week and she'll wake up and she'll bask and she'll be excited to eat, and then she'll just go right back in there and sleep for another week. She's done it every single year, and that's how she operates, where other bearded dragons will go into their hide after they've had their last meal, and they will sleep for 2 or 3 months. So the time range of brumation is going to vary greatly, and it is up to you to kind of keep an eye on how they're doing and what they're doing. And if your animal is like Zsasz, who goes in and out of that brumation, it is super important that you keep an eye on them to make sure that they are getting those meals out, going to the bathroom after they're having them. Digestion stops during brumation, and any food that is left in their bellies will rot and can cause terrible sickness for them. So make sure that you are definitely keeping an eye on that if your animal is one that goes in and out. And also just keep in mind that during brumation, your animal should not be losing weight. They may lose a few grams, but there should not be any kind of noticeable dip in weight and in body mass. So that is something that you are going to keep an eye on during brumation. So now that we have a little background information about brumation, let's actually talk about the signs and what to look for to know if your animal is going into that. Keep in mind this is going to be different for every single animal, so your animal might do a couple of these, it may do none of these, it may just start sleeping one day. And also keep in mind that this is largely dependent on where you live, so just because it is getting cold here, it may not be getting cold where you live. And also it has been widely reported that sometimes it can even be warm where we are, but if in Australia it has started to cool down, bearded dragons will sometimes brumate during that time as if they were on Australian time, just because it is something that is hardwired in. As far as age, bearded dragons usually don't start doing this until after they're about a year old. It does happen to younger bearded dragons, and it has happened to younger bearded dragons often, but on average it's at least a year old before they usually start. So if your bearded dragon has slowed way down, if they're acting lethargic and they are hiding in their hides more often than normal, then they may be going into brumation. You also should look for them slowing down eating. So to prepare for this brumation season, Zsasz first stopped eating bugs altogether. She would still eat her salads, but she stopped eating bugs. Then she started eating her salads less and less, and now she is at a point where she is still fully awake and she still is half hanging out of her hides, and eventually she is going to probably completely stop eating. That is one of the biggest things to look for, is just them losing their appetite. Another thing to look for is them refusing to bask. So bearded dragons normally live for basking. They are in their basking spots, on their hot spots almost all day. And if you notice that your bearded dragon no longer wants to get up there, or you are having to force them to get up there, then it may be a sign of them going into brumation. So what to do when you start noticing these signs to prepare your bearded dragon for brumation? First thing, I would highly advise taking your animal to the vet to get them tested for parasites. There are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, all of these symptoms of them going into brumation are also the symptoms of parasites. Parasites are super common in bearded dragons, and we don't want you thinking that your bearded dragon is about to brumate and preparing for that and turning out lights. Then they actually have parasites and they could get super sick, and we definitely do not want that. So usually if you have a vet that you take your animal to, wonderful. And if you don't, because I know some of you don't, most vets will take in reptile fecal samples and test them for parasites even if they don't normally see reptiles. So definitely make sure you do that as soon as you start noticing those signs to prepare. Some people will try to prevent their animal from going into brumation, but doing this actually can cause more harm than good, because brumation is already kind of stressful for these animals, and preventing them from doing something that their whole body is telling them that they need to do, you could just imagine how much more stressful that is. So in my opinion, I would say to let your animal brumate if they want to brumate, because they know their bodies better than we know their bodies, and they know what they need. Should you induce brumation? So I would suggest not making them go into brumation if they don't want to. Like I said before, they know their bodies the best, so let them do what they want to do, because some just don't brumate at all, and that's perfectly okay. Some people say brumating is stressful and some people say not brumating is stressful, so there really is no right answer there. That is completely up to you. If you want to start lowering your temperatures, you can and just see what happens. That is perfectly okay. Just make sure that you are going through all those other things and preparing them properly for their brumation. Once you are all clear on those parasite tests, the next thing that you're going to want to do is to make sure your animal poops. Digestion stops during brumation, and we do not want any food sitting in their bellies because it could rot and make them super sick. So my suggestion for this, once they have stopped eating, is to give them warm baths, lightly massage their bellies in the bath, make sure they get that last poop out and that there's nothing in their bellies to rot. Bearded dragons are prone to parasites, and they do have a healthy number of parasites in their guts. If food is in there rotting, those parasites are going to multiply insanely fast and cause sickness. So make sure that they have used the bathroom one last time before we start turning out those lights. And on that same topic of not letting that food rot in their belly, once they have stopped wanting to eat, don't force them to eat anymore. Again, this is assuming that you have already tested your animal to make sure that they aren't sick. Once they stop eating, stop feeding them, because again, food rotting in bellies, bad. And they should not be losing weight, even though they are not going to eat anything because they are built for this. But I would suggest taking them out quickly to weigh them about once a week, once every 2 weeks, just to make sure that their weights are still doing good, make sure that they haven't had some kind of crazy influx of parasites and they're dropping weight like crazy. It's not going to disturb them greatly to grab them, stick them on a scale, and put them back. They'll be fine. So weigh them, especially if you look at them and they are starting to look like they're losing weight. As for their lights, in the past I have always kept Zsasz's lights on during brumation because, like I said, she never fully brumates. She stays awake. She just slows way down, but she's usually awake. There are times that she would sleep for a week and I'd turn the lights off, and then she would wake right back up and want to bask again. Keeping their lights on is not going to hurt anything at all, but if you do want to turn them off and maybe save some money on your utility bills, the best way to do this isn't just to turn them off as soon as your animal decides to sleep. The best and safest thing to do is going to be to leave those lights on for about 3 days after they've had that last poop and they've eaten their last meal and they are sleeping, to make sure, 100% sure, that they have gotten everything out and that everything is digested and gone. And then you can slowly start lowering those temperatures. You can go ahead and turn that UV light off, and if your heating light is on a dial, you can take a few days to slowly lower that heating light until it is off, to kind of mimic how it would be in the wild. Or you can just turn them off. That's fine too, because if your animal's sleeping, I mean, they're asleep, they're not really gonna care as much, but that is completely up to you. You can leave those lights on or turn them off, whatever you want. It's not going to hurt them either way. And a lot of people do wonder about metabolic bone disease and turning those lights off. Their digestion has basically come to a complete standstill and their metabolism has slowed tremendously. So they're not going to come out of that sleep after a couple months and just have metabolic bone disease. So that's not something at all that you're going to have to worry about. It is super, super important that they have a good hide in their enclosure during brumation, because that is where they are going to sleep. But also, if you're going to leave their lights on, they need somewhere that they can be in the dark because they're going to be sleeping. They're going to need somewhere that they can be away from that UV light and that heat in the wild. They will be in burrows and they find caves and rocks to hide in. So you want to give them that same opportunity in captivity as well. The only thing during them sleeping that you need to do, other than just leaving them alone, is offer them water. So in the wild, they will usually find moist caves, but we don't really have that ability to offer them that in captivity without risking giving them respiratory infections. So ways to give them water while in brumation: you can put a water bowl in their tank. Just put a small water bowl in there. A lot of times, even if a bearded dragon has never drank out of a water bowl in his life, he will actually still go and find that water if he needs it, if he's starting to get dehydrated. If that doesn't work for you, you can also just lightly mist their nose and letting it run into their mouth if they are half awake, especially, and they'll just lick it off. You can also use a syringe and do the same thing. Just drop water right there on their nose and it'll drop into their mouths. Or you can even give them baths. Now, giving them baths is kind of iffy because it is going to wake them up. It's 100% not something that I would recommend doing often during brumation, maybe one time if they haven't drank any water any other way. But if you do decide to give them a bath, they are going to be very sleepy, so make sure that you are not leaving them in the sink or bathtub or whatever, and the whole time they're in there, make sure that you are supporting their head, because we don't want this little bearded dragon to drown. I would highly suggest though just doing the syringe or a spray bottle and keeping a bowl of water in there for them. And then once they wake up, they might be a little sleepy and groggy when they get up, or you might just walk into the room one day and they're wide awake and ready to eat. And once they wake up, you just kind of go about your normal day. You can immediately get those lights back on. You can weigh them, make sure they didn't lose too much weight, give them a bath, make sure they get rehydrated, and give them food. They might take a little bit longer to start eating again because they haven't eaten in weeks or months, but you can go ahead and start offering food and just keep going about your day. You can even take another stool sample into the vet if you want to make sure that something didn't go wrong during that brumation. Everything just goes back to normal when they wake up, and it's like they never went to sleep other than you being excited to see your little friend again. But that's it for this week, guys. Make sure to leave me questions and comments in the description below of anything that I missed, because I always miss things. And also, I'm super curious, if you have a bearded dragon, let me know how old they are and if they ever brumated, and if they have ever brumated, how old they were when they first did that, because I am super curious, because I always thought it was normal that Zsasz just didn't yet, and apparently not. So let me know in the comments below, because I'm super curious. And like I said at the beginning, this video is sponsored by the Dubia-Doo. TheDubia-Doo.com is an awesome place to get dubia roaches. Just because your bearded dragon is brumating doesn't necessarily mean your other animals are. I know my leopard geckos are still in full force and they have not lost their appetites at all. They are still going strong, and maybe your bearded dragon's not brumating either. Who knows? But dubia roaches are so healthy for your animal. They have so much protein. They are super easy to keep. They live for such a long time, so you can order large quantities and not worry about them dying off super quickly like crickets do, and they don't stink, which is wonderful. The Dubia-Doo's website is also super easy to navigate. Just a few clicks and you have dubia roaches delivered directly to your house, which is so cool and very convenient. Make sure to use my code L at theDubia-Doo.com to save 10% off of your order. Thank you so much to the Dubia-Doo for sponsoring this video. But that's it, guys. As always, if you are not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday. If you guys missed my last vlog, I am not doing Wednesday vlog videos anymore. We are just doing Sundays because of a lot of things. I will leave that video link here if you missed it so you can watch and figure out why. But that's it. Huge thank yous and shout outs to Life with Pets XO for following me on my Instagram and going through and liking a whole bunch of stuff. Thank you so much, Life with Pets. You are the bee's knees. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. These animals are gonna stay in places like burrows, rock caves. Now in the wild during this period, and that the but lightly putting a mist, lightly spraying the tip of their toe,